Have you ever seen a war where both sides walk away shouting, "We won"? Because that is exactly what just happened between the United States and Iran. On one side, Washington is saying its air power crushed Iran's military capabilities and forced Tehran into a ceasefire. On the other side, Iran is telling the world it stared down the most powerful military on earth and survived. So who is telling the truth? Here is the crazy part: both of them might be. And when both sides claim victory, that is usually when the real story gets far more expensive, far more political, and far more dangerous for the future of global power. Tonight, we are breaking down the Iran war, the victories both sides are claiming, the shocking cost behind the fighting, and the one question nobody in Washington wants to answer. Did this war make America look stronger, or did it crack the image of global dominance the world has believed in for decades? Stay with me because the answer is not what it seems. Now, let us start at the first major turning point. The ceasefire. At first glance, it looks simple. The guns go quiet. The missiles stop flying. Oil tankers begin moving again. Diplomats suddenly appear in expensive suits, talking about peace. But ceasefires are never really about peace. They are about exhaustion. They are about both sides deciding that continuing the fight costs more than pausing it. For the United States, the message is clear. Officials want the world to believe military pressure worked exactly as planned. American forces hit key targets. Missile infrastructure was damaged. Air defenses were weakened. Naval pressure kept building. Then suddenly, Iran agreed to negotiations. From Washington's point of view, that sounds like a clean success. Pressure, strike, force talks, claim victory. Simple. But then comes the first escalation in our story. Iran's version. Tehran is not acting like a defeated country. Instead, it is telling its own people, and much of the region, something very different. They survived. And in war, survival itself can be sold as victory. Think about that for a second. When the world's strongest military power enters a conflict, and the opposing government is still standing, still speaking, still negotiating, that government can spin the outcome as resistance and resilience. So now we have two parallel realities. America says it forced Iran to stop. Iran says it forced America to settle. That contradiction is where the real tension begins. Because wars today are not fought only with missiles. They are fought with headlines. They are fought with public opinion. They fight over who controls the story after the smoke clears. And this is where the second turning point hits. The money. Because this war was not just fought with firepower. It was fought with money on a scale that is almost hard to imagine. Every missile launched costs millions. Every carrier group deployed costs millions per day. Every fighter sortie burns through fuel, maintenance, spare parts, and weapons that take time and money to replace. And that is just the direct military bill. The hidden cost is even bigger. The Strait of Hormuz became one of the most important pressure points in the entire conflict. This narrow waterway carries a huge portion of the world's oil supply. The moment tensions there rise, oil prices jump. And when oil prices jump, everything starts getting more expensive. Fuel, shipping, food, manufacturing, travel. Suddenly, a war thousands of miles away starts reaching into people's wallets across the planet. That is when a regional war becomes a global economic event. And now we arrive at the third turning point. The image problem. For decades, the United States has built an image of unmatched global power. When crises erupt, allies look to Washington. Rivals study Washington. Markets react to Washington. That is what dominance looks like. But dominance is not just about having the strongest military. It is about convincing the world that using that strength produces clear results. This war complicates that image. Yes, the United States showed incredible military capability. Nobody doubts that. But what happens when overwhelming force still leads to a ceasefire that feels more like a pause than a solution? That is when people start asking uncomfortable questions. Did America win the battlefield but lose part of the narrative? Did the world see strength, or did it also see limits? Because the strongest power in the world still had to accept that bombs alone could not fully decide the outcome. And that matters. It matters to allies in Europe. It matters to countries in Asia. It definitely matters to rivals like China and Russia, who are watching every move and asking one critical question. How expensive is it for America to maintain its dominance? That question may be the biggest escalation of all. Because wars do not only consume weapons. They consume attention. Every hour spent in the Gulf is an hour not spent somewhere else. Every $1 billion spent on this conflict is $1 billion not spent on other strategic priorities. Power is not just about strength. It is about bandwidth. And this war may have stretched that bandwidth. Now here comes the emotional midpoint, the part that changes how audiences think about the story. What if both sides are technically telling the truth? America may have won the tactical fight. Iran may have won the survival story. One side claims military superiority. The other claims political endurance. That is why modern wars often feel so confusing. Victory is no longer one flag planted on one hill. Victory is multiple stories fighting for legitimacy at the same time. And this leads us into the final escalation. The future. Because the ceasefire is not the end. It is a cliffhanger. Will this lead to negotiations? Will tensions flare again? Will global markets calm down, or are we just one incident away from another spike in oil prices and another round of military escalation? Nobody truly knows. And that uncertainty itself carries a cost. Now for the closing punch. This war may not have ended American dominance. But it may have changed how that dominance is perceived. The United States still has extraordinary military power. That has not changed. What may be changing is the cost of translating that power into lasting political outcomes. And if the cost keeps rising financially, diplomatically, and symbolically, then even the strongest empire starts to feel the weight of its own reach. So here is the question I want to leave you with. When both sides claim victory, who really won? Was it America? Was it Iran? Or was this one of those wars where everyone claims success while the world quietly pays the bill? Because sometimes the most expensive wars are not the ones that end in defeat. They are the ones that end in ambiguity. And ambiguity can reshape global power just as much as any battlefield ever could.